Hey guys, it's Bazwin, and I'm back to talk to you about the changes between the alpha and the beta for Zenith, the last city. There's been a number of core changes to the game, and while my original set of videos are still semi-relevant, there are a number of things that I want to touch on and update you about. So to start, we'll talk about the gliding and movement changes. They've added sensitive gliding, strafe gliding, and heading gliding, each of which has its own feel to it. The sensitive gliding is the preferred method right now because it allows you to change your level of gliding as well as to increase your speed or hover in place, which can be really useful depending on what you're doing. They've also added a jumping feature, which is really nice when you're trying to jump over like a small set of stairs or jump up to a roof or, whatever you're trying to do. It does take a fair bit of stamina, however, it is very useful. Next, we'll talk about the exploration. So chests in the game now have the additional function of respawning, but they now drop gear enhancement materials instead of just money, EXP, and the occasional rare drop. They also have added in tiers, which are crystalline teardrops that you will go and collect to complete a stamina boost quest that is available to the south of the bridge in Zenith. Given that stamina is at a premium, this is particularly useful, so I highly recommend at least undertaking the quest when you get into the game, so that way you can see what your objective completion is to the next point of stamina that you'll get. As far as new zones go, we have a new tutorial slash starting area that takes place in the Undercity or underside of Zenith City. It's a pretty cool area. There is a side quest in the Undercity where you can go and collect mushrooms and get a recipe to make food that will give you a stamina buff. So I highly recommend taking that side quest before you leave if it's available. However, that's something I would look for at release. There are also some new zones from Alpha that are up to level 40, including a desert region, which has sort of a new gathering city place in it. It'll probably be a big respite spot, as well as there's a new hostel zone where there is sort of like a collapsed Imperial feel to it, and it has sort of like a steampunky vibe. But yeah, they've added a bunch of new areas to explore, and I expect there'll probably be more with the actual formal release. As far as environment changes go, they have added random NPCs for ambiance in the outpost areas. They increased the collision with terrain in places, added additional texture layers, and also they boosted the water graphics. As far as swimming and diving goes, now it kind of functions sort of similar to gliding, but it doesn't really cost anything for you to do, so it's actually faster in some cases than walking. The lore crystals. So there are these, I call them crystals. They almost look like an 8-sided dice, but what they are is a recording device that have little fragments of memories from the past of the world of Zenith. When you touch them, you'll get sort of a playback, and it gives you a glimpse into some of the lore of the game. Also, there are breakable objects such as pots added to give more of an impact when interacting with the environment. This is particularly fun if you're playing in your beater gear as a blade master. You just go around slashing open pots, very Zelda-y. As far as UI changes go, they've relocated the stamina bar underneath the HP MP readout, as well as making it longer so that way it's a little easier to tell how much stamina you have. One thing not noted here is that when you are low on stamina, it will put a yellow outline around your view space. This can be a little tedious, but it does tell you that you are about to run out of stamina, so that's a nice little feature. The menu world map now has a region mode, which you can zoom in, zoom out, and adjust it for various viewpoints. They've added a graphics menu, and you can change your PCVR graphics from high, medium, low, and also you can adjust the amount of grass density. There is now device options in the audio menu, as well as a refresh voice chat option to help troubleshoot if you're having trouble connecting to the voice servers. As far as crafting goes, there is new craftable gear. You will be able to craft it once you've gathered enough materials from chests, combat, event completion, etc. And you will take those to these various stations, which are usually located in the zone that is representative of the level of gear you're trying to craft. And you will turn those in and you can craft gear as high as legendary. As far as crafted food goes, you can put that into your quick slots now, and they will appear below your UI. So that way, if you're in combat, you can grab a cookie or something real quick and munch on it and get that regeneration and or buff going. Godstones. So Godstones have changed a bit. In addition to the traditional methods of triggering skills, which is to say your swipe down, your swipe up, your cadences, you also have additional skills for each trigger. In some cases, there's more than one listed right now. Whether or not that will change come release, I don't know. However, there are many more skills, some of which are more practical for use in a group or in a high-end combat situation, whereas some others, especially those leaning towards lifesteal or shielding or that kind of thing, are more useful for solo play and just kind of daily driving. And in addition to these new skills, you now have the ability to pull separate instances of them. And how this works is you'll be out fighting random X monster and it will drop a skill. And you go to your Godstone list and you can see that now you've got this blue version or this purple version of said skill, and it has additional stats that you can unlock. And that is very useful, especially for those that have cooldown reduction or damage increases, or some actually add lifesteal or healing. So collecting those extra Godstones is going to add a certain amount of appeal to the continuing grind that's going to happen to fill out your levels. So to use those stat boosts, you have to be not so much using the skill itself, but it has to be equipped. And as you get EXP, the skill will level, and then you can get points from each level and apply those to the stat boosts of your desire. Additionally, they have added more tooltips and more descriptive tooltips for all of the different skills, and you can see them all from level 1, which is super nice because you don't have to go grind out to max level to actually see what all the skills will potentially do. So you can get a feel just looking at the different skills for a role or a class as to whether or not you're going to like it and whether or not you want to swap. Which brings us to the role swap. They've added the addition to play one class on a character. However, you can swap freely between the roles on that class. That is to say, you can be a tank, you can be a healer, or you can be a DPS, and you can just, with one button click, flick between them in your Godstone menu. So how that's going to work is it's actually going to cost you less to level your sub roles on a given class, and this will not only will it make it easier for you to get your other roles up so that way you can have that freedom to choose what you want to play as, but it's also going to make it so that you don't have to roll as many alts and you're going to get less of that alt fatigue. That brings us to combat changes. There have been a number of combat changes with Zenith since alpha. They've added a more visible block ability by holding the triggers while parrying on Blade Master, and they've also put this into the little Robo Paimon tutorial that they have in there. Essence Mage Tank now has a block ability called God Hands, which you'll press your grips on, put your hands together, and this will create a shield that will allow you to block melee, incoming melee, and potentially projectiles, though I haven't tried it with projectiles. Blade Master can now throw their swords to trigger an ability similar to how their old spears or staves were in the alpha. The swords will return to your hand while gripping, and this can also be used alternatively as a projectile attack, which is kind of funny because you can just sit there and wing them. The weapons themselves for Blade Master now have weight and collision with their themselves. It does have a little more presence and feels a little more real, and it's a nice change. Dying now leaves the player as a sort of a ghost or shade, and in order to respawn, you'll put your hands together and pray, and that will teleport you to the nearest spawn. Or, alternatively, you can be resurrected by any player in the area. Now, there's caveats to that. They have to touch your tether between your shade and your body, and you have a limited amount of space that you can move from your body as a shade. So if you want to move away from the center of combat, let's say you were right on top of where an enemy is when you died, you may want to move further away so that way a friend can resurrect you without pulling aggro. However, that's going to mean that they're going to have to touch your tether for longer, because when they start touching your tether to resurrect you, that's when it starts the resurrection process, and it has to make its way all the way to you before you'll resurrect. So in some cases, it's better just to stay where you died, especially if you're not directly where an enemy is standing. Weak points will occasionally appear on enemies, and they appear as this red orb that will be like on their shoulder, on their weapon, on their head, anywhere. And when those appear, attacking those points is the best option because that will create an additional staggering effect every time you hit those points. Now, usually you'll get like 2 to 3 hits on an enemy at that weak point before it goes away, but usually that's enough to really mess them up. Highly recommend focusing on those weak points when they appear. As far as AI changes go, enemies will now fight back more organically. They'll pretty much do anything you would do. They'll run away, they'll dodge, they'll block, and they'll attempt to get behind you. Their offensives are more punishing because they will now use their skills more effectively, dodging around behind you and then hitting you with a 4-chain attack. And it really makes the use of defensive skills more rewarding because you can very easily, even on the most powerful of classes right now, you can very easily get caught out and die if you allow yourself to be overtaken like that. Also, pulling one enemy can trigger the attention of all nearby enemies. This isn't so surprising, but given that in some cases during events and other situations there may be as many as 10 enemies in one spot, it's best to try and just pull one at range if possible, because you'll still probably pull 2 or 3 and then fight those and then work your way towards the center mass. That's most of the major changes between the alpha videos that I put out and the beta as it exists today. I wanted to throw together full beta videos covering everything I covered during the alpha. However, looking back at the amount of time it took me to cut those videos together and the amount of footage that was required for it, there's no feasible way with these short betas and the short amount of time between now and full release that I'll be able to get that out. So I thought it better just to add this addendum, and then that plus my live stream video that's already up that covers a lot of similar stuff should give you the amplifying information that you need to go into the game with a good idea of how things are going to work. If you have additional questions or feel there's something I've missed, feel free to let me know in the comments below, or hit me up in the Discord, in my Discord, or anywhere you feel comfortable, really. Also, I just want to say to everyone who has subscribed recently, thank you. I'm over 100 subscribers now. I am so stoked, and I am going to keep trying to make better and better video content for, not just for Zenith, but for the community at large. So thank you. It means a lot to me. And if you aren't subscribed, I'm not going to twist your arm, but it would mean a lot to me. Just trying to keep building. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the world of Zenith.